So, you want to know more about Clorinde? Well, you've come to the right place. Welcome to Clorinde in a nutshell, where I talk about the ins and outs of a character. In today's video, I'll be talking about Clorinde, the champion duelist from Fontaine. We'll be talking about her skills, her strongest weapons she can use, best artifacts you can fully utilize, and finally, teammates you want to play her with. And with that said, let's begin with this video. Clorinde is the new 5-star Electro Sword user. When she uses her skill, she enters the Night Vigil state, and she will have 2 special attacks. Her first one is her normal attack, the Swift Hunt, where she can use this normal attack to gain bot of life, as you can see at the bottom, and also be firing enemies in their path. If she has enough bot of life, she can execute the Impale the Knight, which is her special skill, basically removing all bot of life and dashing through her target, dealing damage based on how much bot of life she has accumulated. The more bot of life she accumulates, the stronger the Impale the Knight state happens. So generally speaking, you want to stack the bond of life as fast as possible and remove the bond of life doing a massive amount of damage to the enemies in front of you. So this is the main way you'll be doing damage. On top of using the attacks to stack bond of life, any healing Clorinde receives in the Night Vigil state is converted to bond of life. So potentially, if you heal enough from your healers, you will be able to use the Impale the Knight ability much faster. So this, once again, we'll be talking about later on in the team building section. Her ultimate Last Nightfall basically just gives her bond of life and also dishes huge electro damage in front of the enemy, and this damage is AoE, so nothing spectacular, but it is another source of stacking your bond of life as quickly as possible. Finally, her passive skills, the first one is Dark Shattering Flame. Basically, whenever a nearby party member triggers an electro related reaction, electro damage dealt by Clorinde's normal attack and the Last Nightfall will be increased. So this is another way you will be using to deal more damage for Clorinde. Basically, I will be talking about this more in the team building section. And finally, Lawful Remuneration. If Clorinde's bond of life is greater than 100% of her max HP, her crit rate will be increased by 10% for 15 seconds. So generally speaking, her build has a lot of crit rate. I didn't say it as well, but her Ascension is also crit rate. You will be looking more for a crit damage weapon, which I'll be talking about later on in the weapon section. Her best weapon is Absolution, which is her signature weapon. The main stat of the weapon is crit damage, which is just very good for Clorinde, as she doesn't have crit damage in her kit. Her passive ability also increases her crit damage along with the value of bond of life, which will in turn increase her damage with her skill and also gives her damage from the passive ability. If you have the spare Primogems, you should definitely go for Absolution. It is just such a strong weapon for Clorinde. The next weapon you can consider using for her is the Haran Gepaku Futsu. This is the Ayato weapon, but basically this weapon also increases her elemental damage bonus, which is very good because all her attacks will be converted to electro. Once your nearby party members use their elemental skill, which is probably something you will use before swapping to Clorinde, you will basically increase your normal attack damage for a certain amount for 8 seconds. Generally just very good for Clorinde because you'll be using your normal attack a lot. Next, we have the Light of Foliar Incision. This is the Alhaitham weapon, and in my opinion, this might be the second best weapon because it gives a lot of crit damage, a whopping 88.2% crit damage, which is just insane. The passive also increases her crit rate slightly, not too bad. The most important part is basically whenever your normal attack deal elemental damage, which is basically in her Night Vigil state, the damage dealt by the auto attacks and the elemental skill, by the way, which is her other special attack, will be increased by a percentage of the elemental mastery that Clorinde has. This is very good, especially if you're planning to build Clorinde in a Hyper Bloom team where you want to try to build a little bit more elemental mastery for her. You can consider this weapon, but overall, even if you don't build elemental mastery on Clorinde, this weapon is super good because it has a lot of good stats for Clorinde. Finally, the other 5-star I want to talk about is the Mist Splitter Reforged. Generally a very good 5-star weapons for most sword users in the game right now, and it's not even that hard to trigger all the stacks for it. You just basically have to use her alt, normal attack, and then elemental skill, and basically you will get all the stacks of the Mist Splitter. Generally speaking, a very good sword. For 4-star weapons, the best 4-star weapon is the Craftable Finale of the Deep. This weapon increases her attack as the main stat, but the most important part is the passive, which just gives Clorinde a lot of stats that she wants to use. Basically, when you use the elemental skill, your attack will be increased and a bond of life will be granted. So this is a fast way for Clorinde to get bond of life in order to use her special skill, which will dish a lot of damage. Overall, this weapon is just a good quality of life weapon on Clorinde that she can definitely use as a free 4-star weapon. And it being craftable means that it's very accessible and it's very easy to go to Refinement 5, which will just give Clorinde a lot of damage. The other 4-star weapon I want to actually talk about is Lion's Roar. Lion's Roar increases the damage against enemies afflicted by power of Electro, which is not that hard since Clorinde is Electro, so you'll be easily having that Electro uptime. If you play Clorinde in an overload team, she will easily use this weapon very well if you don't have any of the 5 stars. And finally, 4-star weapons like the Black Sword and Black Cliff Longsword are decent if you need a little bit more of stats instead of the passive. The passive isn't as good, but the stats are what you really want to look for if you're going to use a 4-star weapon anyway. For artifact sections, there's actually 2 decent artifacts you can go for. The latest one right now is the Fragment of Harmonic Whimsy. Basically increases your attack, and whenever your bone of life increases or decreases, your character will deal 80% more damage for 6 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. And if you know Clorinde's playstyle where the bone of life basically keeps going up and down, you can easily get the 3 stacks from this artifact, making this artifact arguably the best artifact for Clorinde. Now the other artifact you can go on Clorinde is Thundering Fury. This artifact set increases your electro damage, and any damage triggered by Overload, Electro Charge, Super Contact, or Hyper Bloom is increased by 40% damage. This is very good, and the best part is if you're running her in Aggravate teams or Hyper Bloom teams, you will still trigger Aggravate and Quicken. Your elemental skill duration will be decreased by 1 second, which is insane. If you ask me, having lower cooldown is very good for Clorinde, so you can keep spamming your skill, which in turn will be doing more damage. So if you have this set ready to go, you can easily use this over the Whimsy. So these are the 2 artifact sets you can use on her. Any other artifact sets you can consider using is any artifact set that increases your elemental skill damage or normal attack damage. One notable artifact set you can use is the Marashuse Hunter. The Marashuse Hunter increases your normal and charge attack, and whenever your HP increases or decreases, your crit rate will be increased for 5 seconds. Generally very good. The only problem is that the crit rate you might overload a little bit. She has a lot of crit rate in her kit already, so just be worried about that. But if you are planning to play a team with Farina, which you probably might be playing if you're playing Clorinde, you can easily just use this set while farming for your Whimsy or Thundering Fury, whichever one you're going for. And the best part is, since a lot of characters already use Golden Troop, you probably have a little bit of the Marashuse Hunter pieces lying around, making this set easily accessible for you to use. For the main stats, obviously for Sans, you want either attack or elemental mastery. So if you're going for a more Hyper Bloom team where you want to do a lot more damage with the blooms, you can go elemental damage, although I wouldn't really recommend. For the Goblet, you can go electro damage or elemental damage, like I said, for Hyper Bloom team. And finally, for the Circlet, try to go for crit damage before crit rate, because she has a lot of crit rate in her kit already. And if you're going Hyper Bloom, like I said for the last time, feel free to just go for elemental mastery. And finally, for the team section, I feel like her best team is a Hyper Bloom variation of Clorinde. 1 Dendro and 1 Hydro minimum for Clorinde, and the 3rd slot being super flexible. You can put in something like a Nemo for Swirl as well, but generally speaking, this is probably the best team you can go for Clorinde, because you can easily get the passive stats going. The other team you can go is for a more Aggravate / Quicken. So you normally will play 1 Anemo, 1 Dendro, and probably 1 more Electro to battery for Clorinde in this case, or you can also go 1 more Dendro depending on who you want to battery and what you prioritize more. But generally, this is also a very good team for Clorinde to go, as she will be doing a lot of damage, generally speaking, because Quicken and Aggravate increases the electro damage that Clorinde is dishing out. If you want to go for a more electro charged team, which is probably my go-to team, you can run something like Yelan or Xingqiu alongside with Kazuha once again to be able to swirl and do a lot more damage. This is a team that you can consider. And lastly, if you want to go for a more overload team with Cheverus, you can easily play that as well. It is very fun. With all that said, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you like videos like this, please do leave a like. It shows me I should do more. Comment down below if you have any questions, or if you have no questions, please comment down below whether you'll be rolling for Clorinde or saving for future characters. And lastly, do subscribe. We'll be doing more of this content in the future, I promise. And with that, I will see you guys next time. Peace.